Joining me right now from the Menzies Research Centre is none other than the wonderful Freya Leach, part of No Sooks, No Lefties. We're so glad you're here. And he's in God's country tonight. Tweed Heads, the South Tweed Club in particular. South Tweed Sports, I know it very well. Other side of the river. If you just go the other side of the road and move your way down, turn left, you can make your way to Seagulls. You keep going up the road, you go to Twin Towns. But where you are right now, great smoking balcony, just turn left and go around the corner, mate. You are in God's country in New South Wales. You can have a bunger while playing the pokies. So enjoy yourself, my friend.
Yeah, Paul, we've had a great time here tonight, Barnaby and I. We've had a little version of our own My Town. Sorry to swipe your trademark there, but we had a couple hundred people turn up here and had a great conversation. It would have been much better viewing than Q&A, I'm sure, on a Monday night.
Is it still on? All right, of course, sorry, Matt Canavan, of course, joining us there from South Tweed. I apologise, I was too excited about my local knowledge. So let's talk about this Newspoll and start to break it down, because it was fascinating to see. We know cost of living, number one issue, but what is the biggest component of cost of living? Now, it's housing, all right? It's rents. I've shown you there the median rates and how they have gone up by bigger than national average, almost 20% in places like Perth. We've shown you about the long lines of queues for rental properties because they bring in more than 1 million people on top of everyone who was looking for a rental property a couple of years ago. And of course, the national average monthly repayment, which used to be $2,000 and a bit, is now $4,000 and a bit. Now, Freya, none of this is a surprise to you, but it really is quite interesting to see that while the Prime Minister, and we'll get onto it in a second, wants to talk about supermarkets and groceries, when we're talking about cost of living, 12 interest rate rises has a consequence. And guess what? They know the government is kind of responsible.
It's refreshing to see, to be honest, because I think for a long time we saw the RBA starting to hike rates, but it was like, when are people going to realise? When are they going to wake up and realise this is actually the result of reckless Labor spending? And I think now when your hip pocket is affected, and keep in mind, it's not just challenging to rent, it's virtually impossible.
Correct.
And it's not just challenging to repay your mortgage, it is almost virtually impossible as well. The interest you're paying on your mortgages has probably tripled over the last 2 years.
And if you don't mind me saying, for people like yourself that are trying to get in and around the market, the set of financial difficulties and the loans and the housing stock and who you're competing with means we're kind of back to the 90s in terms of how steep that thing is. It's not 17%, but
Correct.
It's quite a steep climb.
And the question is now, and I think this is going to be really critical for the coalition going forward, is those people that have abandoned Labor, where are they going?
They're up for grabs. Good.
And so this is the challenge. I think we're seeing Labor's primary vote decline to the same level it was at the 2022 federal election. But those votes aren't necessarily going to the coalition yet.
Correct.
They're going to the Greens and the Independents. So I think a matter of absolute priority for Matt and the coalition team up there is to come up with a housing policy ASAP.
So, Matt, I'm not going to push you for what it is or what your idea is, because I'm not interested in giving the free kick to, the Guardian to say, oh, freewheeling and now it's being denied. I don't care, right? But how important is it that people in and around who want to see some votes change here don't just rely on people being peed off with the government. They've got to see that there's another option than the government.
Well, you're absolutely right, Paul. And look, I was out door knocking this afternoon in Nerang with our state LNP state candidate Bianca Stone and Heather. I met a lady called Heather, and she can't find a place to live. She's having to stay with a friend right now. There simply isn't enough homes in Australia. Freya's exactly right. The reason there isn't enough homes is that this government has lost control of our borders. They came into office with the job of opening up after COVID. They just opened the floodgates, and we've now had 2 million people turn up in 2 years in gross terms, 1 million people in net terms. That rate of migration is more than double what we presided over when we were in government. I'm not including the COVID years, obviously taking those out, just the non-COVID years that we were in government. About 225,000 people a year would come in net terms. It's now around 500,000 for the last 2 years. It's ridiculous. And now Anthony Albanese is saying, I'm going to reduce it. I'm going to reduce it down to 250,000, which is still 25,000 more than average. Peter Dutton's saying, let's take it below 200,000. Let's get back. Let's catch up a bit. Let's make sure that our people aren't living in tents before we take in record numbers of people, still above average numbers of people like this Albanese government wants to do. We've
And
got to
let's
look
not-
after Australians first.
And let's also start to front load no foreign buyers for a couple of years. This is again just for those that are in and around that market, thinking about it for their kids, etc. The no foreign buyers stuff, which of course is racist and horrible and all of that business, according to lefty law and the rest of them. It's good. I love you just mentioned Nerang again. Favourite indoor go-karting circuit in Australia's there. Slideways. Go to Spencer Road, I think it is. Yeah, Spencer Road. Go and
I
check
haven't
it out
done that
there.
one.
Pay
I've
for the
spent a lot of
licence.
time in Nerang,
Mate,
but I
you go
haven't
up,
gone to
you
the
go
go-karting.
under, you go round. It is.
I'm going to spend some time with you on the Gold Coast one time, Paul. We'll have a blast.
Tell you, watch out,
Mini
Tom
golf.
Tate. If I ever turn up, I'm running and I will be the mayor. All right? There's no question, all right? They'll call me a blow-in, but in my heart, it never leaves.
No, mate, this is your spiritual home. Your spiritual home is here.
Bloody oath, could somebody tell my missus? Somebody tell my missus. All right. Otherwise, divorce straight away. Anyway, now, joke, darling. Now, let's talk here about the supermarkets, because, Freya, I think the government got a little bit of a rhetorical win here, because they are, I mean, we saw it today. The Prime Minister basically trying to pretend, supermarkets and groceries is the reason why interest rates are so high. Garbage. I've already listed the basket of goods that actually go in to all of that. And last time I checked, Coles and Woolies not involved in housing, not involved in transport, not involved in insurance, let alone, of course, tobacco, which the government is involved in. And they keep putting up the taxes. But whatever, all right? But the question here is that if you're able to have an allegation of a certain bad behaviour in and around pricing, then the evil moustache is able to be shoved straight onto them, and Labor will do that as what they think is the chief example of cost of living. But that poll showed us that that's only true for a quarter of people who say cost of living is the number one issue.
Labor will find absolutely anyone and anything to blame other than themselves. Right. 2 weeks ago, it was the RBA. It was all the RBA's fault, the cost of living, the interest rates, all the RBA's problem. Now they've managed to find another scapegoat, the supermarkets. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the discounting stuff they're doing looks pretty dodgy, and it's not fair. They should be brought to justice. But come on, it is just searching for scapegoats. I mean, but it gets even more ridiculous than that. The New South Wales Treasurer, Daniel Mookhey, has also tried to blame Donald Trump's re-election on the state of the New South Wales economy.
Yes.
It's honestly, it's like, okay, let's just find some imaginary issue, and that is going to be the thing. Anything to distract Australia from the fact that they're spending an extra $315 billion.
The cost of rocket fuel in the place clock. That's the reason. That's the reason it's going up. All right. Now, again, Matt, I remember we had a conversation, not after the last budget, but actually one of the first that Chalmers put in place. And there were all of these extra little sort of road issues in and around transport, extra taxes that were going to be placed on primary producers to have to pay for the inspection of things. Now, again, I'm not defending companies that pretend to have discounts but are not actual discounts, right? They're behaving like a jeweller from sort of 20, 30 years ago. We all remember those stupid sales, or the Persian rug joint that's going out of business for 7 years. But let's be honest here. This government has done things to add to the cost of everything in the supermarket, including the cost of the energy to produce all of the things in the supermarket.
Well, just do a check on that. That's an excellent point, Paul. You can check that for yourself when you go through and look at what are the things that have gone up most in value in the supermarket aisle. The one I see that blows my mind all the time is cheese. Cheese has become so much more expensive. Just a standard block of cheese is up by well over 20%, according to the ABS. I think it's more than that sometimes. And so why is things like cheese gone up so much? Yogurt's gone up, dairy goods have gone up, bread's gone up. The products that have all are processed and use a lot of energy, like milk, like cheese, they've gone up more than other things like fresh fruit and vegetables, fresh beef. All those things haven't gone up as much. They typically go up and down in cycles. But the stuff that needs energy, needs to stay refrigerated, needs to be processed, that's gone up by a fortune. And it's gone up because of this government's terrible energy policies that have taken a country with beautiful and bountiful energy supplies, some of the lowest power price in the world, and now we're basically at the other end of the spectrum there. So we're all paying for that. And obviously the Prime Minister's looking for a life-saving raft here because of that. I'm not excusing Woolies and Coles either, but they're obviously not scared of what the Labor Party's doing. They're continuing to act like this despite the threats of a mandatory code of conduct, which is a wet lettuce form of regulation. I do think we need tougher competition laws, real competition laws, like what Peter Dutton and us are proposing to introduce divestiture powers here like the rest of the world has. I think we then get a change of behaviour from the major supermarkets.
But also, there's another issue here too, right? And Peter Malinauskas, I'll never forget, Peter Malinauskas, People's Forum, week before the South Australian election, okay? Now, he could have fallen into the Albo trap, which he did before the 22 election, which was to say, I promised to bring prices down, I'm going to, every single item is going to come down. He said, look, government's not involved in everything, we're not responsible for everything, so I'm not going to promise something that can't be delivered. Freya, how politically toxic do you think is the Prime Minister's promises in 22 that failed to deliver? The expectation, that slide that I show every couple of nights, right? Cost of living will be better under a Labor government, but on every single indices, and I'm just looking at what Matt was talking about before, as always, he's 100% right on alcoholic, non-alcoholic beverages, bed, cereal, meat, dairy, fruit, and you name it, it's all correct, right? About up, let alone everything else we've talked about. We talk about it, we're aware of it, but how potent do you think it is in the general community that they were promised something better, or is that just something that those of us that follow the detail are aware of?
Well, I hope it's not. And I think we do. Well, it's hard to tell because we live in this politics bubble, and anyone watching this program right now.
We count the grains of sand on the beach. Other people just drive past the beach.
Exactly. But I do think that Albo has completely lost all credibility on energy policy. Before the federal election, he promised that your household power bills would go down by $275. He promised that, and Matt can fact check me on this, but I think it was on 92 occasions 100%. He repeated that. I don't think people will have forgotten. And so I'm active on TikTok, and I'll post stuff about cost of living.
China's surveillance app, but I understand.
I know, but look, that's where Gen Z is, so that's where we have to be as well. And the stuff I post...
I just say that to annoy my mate Trev, who loves it.
It's pretty addictive. The content I post about cost of living resonates so strongly. It always does well in the algorithm. People engage with it, they comment. And so I think people are waking up. The question is whether they remember the promises that were made before the last election. But that's why people like you are so important, Paul, to hold them accountable.
Come back every night. All right, and I'll take you to the Southport Sharks for a buffet dinner when we're up on the goal. I'm just going to list all my favourite joints. I'm serious. Every time I go, a couple of times a year, there's about 6 places over and over and over again. All right. Now, just a last one on all of this, Matt, right, which is, let's also talk about what else is out in the market, right? The Greens, literally, in the Victorian Parliament are saying, price controls. We're going to literally walk around Kamala Harris style and say what something can be sold for. When you're coming up against that sort of populism from the left, is there a chance that what Freya's talking about here, about people who are absolutely peed off about how high everything is, they don't care what the reason is, they'll just go to where they think a solution is? And how realistic is it that they go to the Greens, who are just promising by the sheer hand of government they can bash down the cost of bread?
Yeah, look, I think that is a real threat, Paul. It's a real threat, probably more so if we leave a vacuum and not come up with other solutions for people's problems. They want solutions and they'll be desperate for anything. You can tell the Greens right now, they've basically dropped climate change as a political issue. You hardly ever hear them talk about it outside of Canberra. On the ground, I know, in the streets around Brisbane and where they're trying to win seats, they've only really got one policy, and that's rent control. Now, rent control is a policy that's failed everywhere it has been tried in the world, but it won't stop, as you say, desperate people, understandably, trying to cling on to something like that. That's why I think it's very important that we do take a full set of policies to the election, that we don't shrink on our values, we don't shy away from our principles, because if we're offering a proper and coherent set of responses to people, it's more likely to be the antidote to those cheap and lazy solutions like rent control. So, I think we should take on the whole kit and caboodle, get rid of this net zero rubbish, all these climate targets. The only target we should have going for election for the Australian people is a cost of living target. It should be our number one and only focus in everything we're doing, controlling our borders, promoting housing ownership, getting our energy system fixed, are all focused on that cost of living target, not meeting an international climate change target, which no one in the world is taking seriously anyway.
Well, which might completely implode on what may be happening in November in the United States.